asking that all church members bring a copy of your tax returns so that I can review them. I'm going to put a stop to some of y'all playing in my face during tithes and offerings on Sunday morning.
The moment the statement was heard, it immediately sparked outrage and disbelief. A pastor standing before his congregation reportedly issued an unusual directive, one that many believers say crosses a line that should never be crossed inside a church. According to the message circulating online, the pastor instructed members to bring copies of their tax returns so he could verify whether they were giving the correct amount in tithes and offerings. For some listeners, the demand sounded shocking. For others, it raised serious concerns about the growing tension between financial expectations and spiritual leadership in modern churches. The controversy has quickly ignited a larger conversation about authority, personal privacy, and the role of money within religious communities. If you want to stay informed about important discussions like this, remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss future reports. At the center of the debate is the pastor's alleged request for members to submit copies of their tax returns. The instruction was reportedly presented as a way to ensure that believers were contributing the correct percentage of their income to the church through tithes and offerings. In many Christian traditions, tithing refers to giving a portion, often 10%, of one's income to support the church and its ministries. For centuries, many believers have practiced this form of giving as an act of faith and gratitude. However, the controversy in this case arises not from the concept of tithing itself, but from the method used to enforce it. Critics argue that asking church members to hand over personal financial documents goes far beyond spiritual guidance. Tax returns contain sensitive information about a person's income, employment, and financial situation. Requiring congregants to disclose that information to a pastor or church staff can feel invasive and uncomfortable. Some observers say it transforms what should be a personal act of faith into a monitored financial transaction. The request has also raised broader concerns about financial control within churches. In many faith communities, pastors are respected as spiritual leaders who provide guidance, teaching, and pastoral care. Their authority often carries significant weight because congregants trust them to act in the best interest of the community. However, critics argue that spiritual authority does not grant the right to manage or inspect members' personal finances. According to them, faith leadership should focus on spiritual development rather than financial oversight. When pastors begin monitoring members' income or giving patterns, critics say it can create an atmosphere of pressure and control. Instead of feeling inspired to give, congregants may begin to feel scrutinized or judged. This dynamic can change the relationship between church leaders and members, shifting it from one based on trust to one influenced by financial accountability measures that many believers believe should remain private. Another issue that has drawn strong reactions is the tone reportedly used by the pastor when addressing the matter of offerings. According to critics, the pastor suggested that some members were playing in his face during the offering time, implying that they were deliberately giving less than they should. For many listeners, that phrasing sounded confrontational and accusatory. It gave the impression that the pastor viewed financial contributions not as voluntary acts of worship, but as obligations that must be enforced. Critics say this language reveals a troubling attitude toward money in the church. Instead of expressing gratitude for whatever members choose to give, the pastor appeared to focus on what he believed they were withholding. For some observers, that focus suggests a deeper problem, a mindset where financial contributions are prioritized above the spiritual well-being of the congregation. They argue that when leaders begin to measure faith primarily through financial giving, the message of the church can become distorted. A major part of the criticism centers on the belief that giving should never be forced. In many Christian teachings, generosity is described as a reflection of gratitude and faith rather than an obligation enforced through pressure. When believers choose to give, the act is often seen as a personal expression of devotion. Critics argue that introducing requirements, such as financial verification, undermines this principle. Instead of giving freely, members may feel compelled to comply out of fear of judgment or embarrassment. That shift can change the entire meaning of generosity within the church. What once felt like an act of worship may begin to feel like a mandatory fee for participation in the community. According to many commentators, This transformation is deeply troubling because it replaces voluntary generosity with institutional pressure. Several critics have also pointed to biblical teachings they believe challenge this kind of financial oversight. One frequently mentioned passage comes from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus Christ warns against practicing acts of righteousness publicly for the purpose of gaining recognition. In that teaching, Jesus encourages believers to give quietly rather than seeking attention for their generosity. The message emphasizes sincerity of heart rather than public demonstration. Critics say that requiring members to present tax returns contradicts this principle. Instead of allowing giving to remain a private matter between the individual and God, the requirement would bring financial contributions into a visible and measurable process. For many believers, that idea feels inconsistent with the spirit of the teaching. The debate also touches on broader principles about leadership within the church. In several teachings attributed to Jesus, religious leaders are warned against dominating or controlling those they serve. The message emphasizes servant leadership rather than authority used for personal advantage. Critics argue that demanding financial documentation from church members risks creating the very kind of leadership structure these teachings warn against. When leaders begin exercising power over the personal decisions of their followers, the relationship between pastor and congregation can shift in unhealthy ways. Instead of guiding people towards spiritual growth, leadership may begin to resemble management or enforcement. Another passage frequently mentioned in the discussion comes from the first epistle to Timothy, which outlines qualities expected of church leaders. In this text, pastoral leaders are described as individuals who should be above reproach, respectable, self-controlled, and not lovers of money. These qualifications have long served as a benchmark for evaluating the character of those who hold positions of authority in the church. Critics argue that the demand for tax returns appears inconsistent with these expectations. They say that when a pastor seems preoccupied with monitoring financial contributions, it can create the impression that money has become a central concern. Whether or not that perception reflects the pastor's true intentions, the appearance alone can damage trust within the congregation. Another widely cited teaching appears in the second epistle to the Corinthians, where believers are reminded that giving should not occur under compulsion. The passage emphasizes that generosity should come from a willing heart rather than pressure or obligation. According to critics, this principle directly contradicts the idea of verifying members' income to ensure compliance with tithing expectations. They argue that true generosity cannot be forced. When people feel pressured to give, the spiritual value of the act may be lost. Instead of expressing gratitude or faith, the contribution may simply become a response to institutional expectation. Beyond theological concerns, the situation also raises practical questions about the potential impact on church members and visitors. For longtime members, being asked to share tax documents could feel embarrassing or intrusive. Some individuals may worry about privacy or fear being judged based on their income level. Others might feel uncomfortable discussing personal finances with church leadership. The situation could be even more confusing for first-time visitors who are exploring the church for the first time. Imagine attending a service out of curiosity or spiritual interest and hearing that members are expected to submit financial documents to their pastor. Critics say such messages could discourage newcomers and create the impression that financial contribution is more important than spiritual welcome. These concerns have led some observers to offer strong advice to believers who encounter similar situations. Their message is straightforward. If a church places excessive pressure on financial giving or attempts to control members' finances, it may be wise to reconsider whether that environment is healthy. According to these critics, churches should primarily focus on spiritual teaching, community support, and personal growth. When money becomes the dominant theme, the core mission of the church can become overshadowed. They encourage believers to seek communities where generosity is encouraged but never demanded, where giving remains a personal decision rather than a monitored obligation. Ultimately, the controversy highlights a larger question facing many faith communities today. How should churches balance financial needs with spiritual integrity? Most congregations depend on donations to support their ministries, pay staff, and maintain facilities. At the same time, those financial needs must be addressed in ways that respect the dignity and freedom of church members. When giving remains voluntary and rooted in faith, it can strengthen a community and support meaningful work. But when financial expectations become intrusive or coercive, the trust that holds a congregation together may begin to erode. As discussions about this incident continue, many believers are reflecting on the deeper values that define healthy spiritual leadership. Integrity, humility, and respect for the personal lives of congregants remain central principles in most faith traditions. Leaders who embody these values often inspire generosity naturally, without needing to enforce it. The debate surrounding this pastor's directive has therefore become more than a single controversy. It has become a reminder of the importance of accountability, transparency, and wisdom in church leadership. If you want to continue following discussions like this and stay informed about important issues affecting faith communities, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future uploads.